What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. As you all know, we are currently covering different stories that took place around the Fatal Attractions era for X-Men comics. The stories that came before Fatal Attractions and the stories that came after the event. Now today, we're going to sit down and cover another miniseries that came out, I want to say, a couple of months before the last three chapters for Fatal Attractions, and that would be the miniseries for Gambit. In the early 1990s, really late 80s, going into the 1990s, he became a very popular character. And so alongside with Cable, Sabretooth, Deadpool, you have Marvel say, you know what, let's give Gambit his own solo series as a way to explore a tad bit more about his origin story. Now, we don't get everything here in this mini-series, but we do get some good pieces of information to kind of help us understand the character a tad bit more. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, as we dive into the opening pages of this book, we are being introduced to a new character known as the Tide Collector. Now, this character right here, at first, kind of seemed like he was the boogeyman. And the reason why, because the narration in this story is kind of telling us that he only appears every 7 years. But apparently, he's so scary that you had mothers telling their children to be good, and they're not being good, well, he'll come for them. And so he does appear in the streets of New Orleans. And when he does appear, you have different people on the streets begin to freak out and realize they have to leave, because right now this is a thieves guild situation. And so they try to get away, except they're all killed off by another person, somebody we have not seen since our early coverage of the X-Men 1991 series. And I'll talk more about that character here in a moment. But let's go ahead and jump over to the star of the book, and that would be Gambit. And so when we actually pick up with the star of the book, we see him in the Danger Room, but working alongside with Rogue. Now you have Wolverine and Storm kind of running this Danger Room session, but something I do want to point out early on in this section is, well, two things actually. But the first is that for Wolverine and Storm, they're still trying to see if Gambit and Rogue will be a great fit for the team, but also can these two characters actually work together? Because they realize that these two characters do have some feelings for one another. And that kind of leads into the second thing I do want to talk about. The whole idea of Rogue and Gambit in the early 1990s. Now, you may have seen some of my other X-Men videos where you see the two characters kind of trying their best to work things out and be an actual couple. I won't say a character, an actual couple. But in this story arc right here, written by Mackie, it's really more the idea that they're still trying to figure out if they can be together. And really, is Rogue and Gambit both showing that they're kind of scared to initiate an actual relationship. More Rogue than Gambit. But either way, you do have the two characters continue on with their training session. But while you have our two characters trying to continue on with their training session, you have somebody else trying to break into the school of Charles Xavier. Now, this person is going to be used as a way to bring Gambit back down to New Orleans. But while you have our two characters in the Danger Room, you actually have Rogue go out of her way to protect Gambit before he got seriously injured in the middle of the training session. But as soon as you have the actual session done, you have Gambit say, hey, listen, I gotta go, because it seems like we have a visitor. And honestly, I don't know if they're good or bad. And so Gambit leaves just like that. And so you have Gambit go ahead and confront the person who is trying to break into the school of Charles Xavier, and that would be Henry. Now, Henry is kind of like a brother to Gambit. They're both part of the Thieves Guild, but when it comes to Henry, he's saying, listen, even though you have been kicked out of the Thieves Guild, we need you to come back home. Now, remember, when it came to Gambit, he had a wife before the X-Men, and her name was Belladonna, but she was part of the Assassin Guild, and apparently their marriage was supposed to bring peace between the two guilds, but the problem was her brother, Julian, hated the idea of Gambit marrying his sister, and so he asked for a duel against Gambit, and unfortunately he had been killed off. Or we thought he was dead, because you have Henry say, listen, Julian's alive right now, and currently he's out there being a crazy killer, killing off different members of the Thieves Guild. But you also have Henry tell Gambit that it's time of the year where you have all the different families of the Thieves Guild come together for the collection, the Tide Collection. And apparently the assassins, including Julian, do not want the Thieves Guild to actually pull off this year's collection. Now, while you have Henry trying to tell everything to Gambit, somebody in the shadows kills off Henry just like that. Now, for Gambit, he knows who had killed off his friend, and that'll be a member of the Assassin Guild. And so for Gambit, it's time to go hunting. But then we get our first look of the adoptive father of Gambit, and that'll be Gene. Now, Gene Luck is actually, like I said, the father of Gambit, the adoptive father, but also the leader of the Thieves Guild. Now, apparently, he's hoping that all the different families of the Thieves Guild can come together for this year's collection, but also get their first taste of some kind of elixir. And this elixir is going to be really important for today's video. But at the same time, we're also getting another first appearance for another character, and that would be Candra. Now, Candra is actually an external, and we had talked about them before. It's a group of mutants out there who all have the ability of immortality, but they also have their own different abilities as well. Like, for example, she has the ability of being a psychic, telekinesis. Now, with that being said, apparently she plays a big role when it comes to the Assassin Guild and the Thieves Guild as well. But as we get back over to Gambit, we see that Gambit is trying his best to hunt down the assassins that had killed off his brother Henry. They're trying their best to hide, but for Gambit, he does not fight like a Thieves Guild. He fights like a member of the Assassin Guild. And so you have Gambit right now just trying his best to hunt them down. Now, I want to jump back over to Wolverine and Rogue just for a brief moment, because you have Wolverine realize that between Rogue and Gambit, it's the same kind of love that he had for Mariko. And he's telling Rogue, hey, listen, one, he'll be okay. But two, like, you guys need to go ahead and be a couple. Come together as one, because what I see is the same kind of love that I had for Mariko. And I would hate the idea of you two losing that love for just some strange reason. Back to the battle between Gambit and the members of the Assassin Guild. You have Gambit being able to take down the different members of the guild very easily. But here comes his next problem. You see, for Gambit, he finds out that Julian is alive. His brother-in-law, the brother to Belladonna, he is alive and well. And the question is right now, how? Because for Gambit, when it came to him leaving the Thieves Guild, it was because he killed off his brother-in-law to keep peace between the two guilds. But right now, apparently, Julian is alive. And Julian was able to get a few members of the Assassin Guild on his side to go after the Thieves Guild. But either way, once you have Gambit being able to take down Julian once again, you have Julian say one last thing to Gambit before teleporting away, saying that, hey, listen, Belladonna is alive. Now, if you saw my earlier coverage over the X-Men, you would know that for Belladonna, the last time we saw her, she died when the X-Men had teamed up with Ghost Rider to fight against the Brute, or we thought she had died, but apparently she is alive. And so the ending of the first chapter is really more of Gambit telling Storm, Charles Xavier, and Wolverine that he has to leave. He has to go to figure out what is exactly happening right now in New Orleans with the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. The whole idea of Belladonna. Now for Storm and Wolverine, they want to go with him, but he says, no, this is a family thing. Now Rogue says like, hey, listen, I'm going no matter what. You can't stop me. Even though your wife may still be alive, I'm still coming with you because I care for you. And so you have the two characters leave to go figure out what's happening in New Orleans. And so as we dive into the second chapter, we pick up with Gambit breaking into the actual home base for the Assassin Guild. Now, when he does break into the base, it's Gambit right now just showing off his Thieves Guild ability, the ability to sneak around the actual place. But while doing that, he walks into a room. And when he does walk into that room, he finds Belladonna. She is alive and well. Well, not well, because apparently it seems that she's in a coma, but she's still alive technically. Now, you do have some members of the Thieves Guild appear, and they do try to battle against Gambit. And you have Gambit being able to actually fight against the Assassin Guild. And honestly, it's a very short battle because one, it's Gambit. He's a great fighter. But two, because the actual boss of the Assassin Guild walks into the room. The father of Belladonna and Julian. And technically, the father-in-law for Gambit is now here to have a conversation with his son-in-law. Now, his name is actually Maurice. Now, for Maurice, he has no love for Gambit at all. And the reason why, because he blames Gambit for the loss of both of his children, both Julian and also Belladonna. Now, technically, he does know that both of his kids are alive, except Belladonna's in a coma and Julian's some kind of crazy assassin at the moment. And really, for Maurice, he says, that is not my son. Yes, it is him, but he's not acting like he used to. Either way, for Maurice, he wants to go ahead and kill off Gambit. And so you do have the two characters begin to battle against one another. Now, again, it's Gambit. He's the hero of the book. He is actually able to take down Maurice very easily. But Maurice did not come alone. The man brought other assassins with him. And it does kind of seem like Gambit is completely surrounded. Except let's not forget that for Gambit, he also brought somebody else with him, and that would be Rogue. And so you have Rogue appear just in time to actually help out Gambit to fight against the other members of the Thieves Guild. Now, once he was able to actually take all of them down, he has a new goal in mind. And that new goal in mind? So for Gambit right now, his main goal is to save the life of his wife. Now, we also learn from Maurice that apparently when it comes to the two guilds, they do make a pact with one another. The Assassin Guilds get the power, but the Thieves Guild get the power of life. Now, the power of life is really interesting because it goes into the whole idea of this elixir, the elixir of life. And apparently it's Maurice saying, use the elixir to save the life of your wife, the life of my daughter. Do it. Now for Gambit, he has to at first pretend he has no idea what Maurice is talking about. Maurice says, dude, don't play around. Like, I know you know what I'm talking about. Either way, you have Rogue and Gambit leave with the body of Belladonna to possibly save her life with this elixir. Now, right after you have Gambit and Rogue leave with Belladonna, Julian appears again. Now, when he appears, he's still that crazy assassin who wants the elixir, but now he wants his sister as well, but keep both things away from his father. Because we do learn that apparently for Julian, he has formed his own group in the Assassin Guild, a rogue group. And so his main goal is to continue to take down his father's group, but to also get the elixir, but to also get his sister back as well. And so you actually have Julian say, listen, I won't kill you right now, father, because killing you would be too easy. But just know, we are not done here at all. But when we finally jump back over to Gambit and Rogue, we see them arriving at the home of the Thieves Guild as they're going through the actual ceremony for the collection. Now, for Gambit and Rogue, they kind of just bust into the room, and all the different members of the Thieves Guild cannot believe that Gambit is there. But it's Gambit saying, listen, I need to talk to my father. And so you actually have Jean say, listen, let me go ahead and talk to my son. But because you had Gambit just barge into the actual room, the actual ceremony has been stopped by the collector. He had actually left, but he says, fix your problem and we may, just may, be able to continue on with the ceremony. And he takes away the elixir of life with him. Now, the actual conversation is very short lived. And the reason why, because you have Jean tell Gambit, like, listen, I could not give her the elixir of life because she is an outsider. She's not one of us. But on top of that, when it comes to the elixir of life, there are three different pieces of it. Three different containers that contain different parts of the actual elixir of life. And unfortunately, they only have one. Now, maybe the collector has another one, but the question is right now, where is the third piece? And so you have Gambit realize that he will not get any help at all from the people he calls family. And so he has no choice but to figure out how he's going to save the life of Belladonna on his own with the assistance of Rogue. And so he leaves. Now, Pierre, another member of the actual guild, tells Jean, like, listen, we need all three pieces of the elixir of life to be able to go through the complete ceremony. And they are afraid that Gambit might actually ruin the entire thing. But now we actually pick back up with the Tide Collector, who's just minding his business until he is actually attacked by different members of the Assassin Guild that now works for Julian. But on top of that, he's also attacked by a member of the Thieves Guild as well, and that would be Pierre. And we do learn Pierre is actually working alongside with Julian to collect all three pieces of the elixir of life. And apparently they can't do anything at all until they get all three pieces. And so Julian had paid Pierre to help out and get the other piece, or one of the three pieces. And so you have Julian Pierre being able to actually get the jump on the collector and being able to get one of the three pieces of the elixir. The other piece he had left with it. And the third piece is currently with the Thieves Guild. And so you have Julian say, listen, we already got one piece, and right now I'm going after him to get the other piece. But your goal is what I paid you for, to get the piece your guild has. So let's go ahead and go through our plan. Now, for Gambit, he knows what he has to do. He has to leave Belladonna behind with Rogue to be able to get all three different samples of the elixir of life. And so he has to leave to go pay a visit to somebody he has not seen in a good while. Now, we also learned that he bought a home a while back to have a family with Belladonna. And so he tells Rogue, stay here with her to take care of her as I leave to hopefully figure out how I'm going to save the life of my wife. But as we get into the third chapter, we do pick up with Gambit once again. And we see that Gambit has traveled all the way over to, well, Paris. And the reason why? To find Candra. Because Candra does have huge connections to both of the guilds. And so he's kind of hoping with working with her could lead to him actually finding the elixir of life, but to also save the life of his wife. And so when he arrives at Paris Casino, he does ask around for Candra. And the different workers at this casino tell him, like, hey, listen, we have no idea who you are talking about. But then he's confronted by some bodyguards. Now, these bodyguards are security guards, They work for Candra. And their main goal is to, well, it seems to take him out, but at the same time, test him to see if Gambit is still, Gambit. Does he have the skills of a fighter? So once you have the security guards take him outside somewhere, you have Gambit being able to actually take them all out just like that. And after doing that, he's then confronted by the collector once again. And he's all like, hey, listen, Candra wants to see you. And he knocks out Gambit and everything goes black. But now we have to jump over to Rogue, who stayed behind to protect Belladonna until Gambit is able to come back with the elixir of life. Now, while doing that, we're also being introduced to another new character, and that would be Maddie. Now, we learn very quickly here that Maddie is a healer. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to learn much about the character until down the road and later story arcs. Just know that she is a healer, and also she works for the Thieves Guild. With all that being said, once you have Maddie actually leave the room, you have Rogue begin to think about using her powers to gain the memories of Belladonna. And the reason why? So that she is able to learn what it's like to be with Gambit, to feel the idea of being in love with Gambit. Because remember, these two characters unfortunately cannot be in a full-on relationship. And this moment right here is going to be very important, not just with this story arc, but other story arcs down the road as well. Now, when we jump back over to Gambit, we actually see Gambit waking up with the Collector in front of him. And you have the two characters actually battle against each other. Now, as the fight goes on, the fight is actually broken up by Candra. She does appear. Now, this is also a very important moment, and the reason why, because we begin to learn again more about Gambit and his connections to all these characters, including Candra as well, because we learn that these two characters actually had a past with one another because they kiss. But for a brief moment, as we go back over to Rogue, she begins to think about the idea of just going ahead and touching the body of Belladonna to get the idea of what it feels like to be with Gambit. But then she realized she's one, being selfish, but two, she could seriously hurt Belladonna by using her powers. But then that is the moment Belladonna grabs Rogue. And when she does, bam, she begins to absorb all the memories of Belladonna with her being with Gambit. But then we jump back over to Candra and also Gambit. Now, we learn here that Candra is still very upset with Gambit because, again, this man was in love with her, but he also worked alongside with her. But apparently, he left her behind like he does to most of the women in his life. But she also knows that currently he's trying to get his hands on the elixir of life, but also she knows there are two other women in his life right now that has his heart, Belladonna and also Rogue. And she says, I know that currently you're going back and forth on who to choose, but either way, I know you're here for the elixir of life. Now, we also learn here that when it comes to Candra being external, she was the one who has been technically using the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild for her own personal gain. And matter of fact, it was her who put the two guilds together and making sure they keep each other in check. Now, we don't get the full story here with Candra and why she has done that, but apparently she's actually tired of both guilds and trying to create a new system. But she also tells Gambit, like, listen, if you work for me, you can have the elixir of life, but you have to kill off your father for all the damage you have done to my entire organization with the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. And so she pulls out his father saying, kill him and everything will be okay. But on top of that, you'll get the elixir of life. Now, you have the book go back over to Rogue to kind of show us that Rogue is now getting the full-on experience of what it's like to be Belladonna but be in love with Gambit, to be able to touch Gambit, kiss Gambit, all those different things that Rogue unfortunately cannot feel at all. But now she realized that she may or may have not seriously damaged the mind of Belladonna. Now, I want to jump back over to Gambit and Candra because you have the two characters still talking to one another about the idea of, killing off his father to get the elixir of life. Now, for Gambit, he does not want to do that at all. But before he is able to actually make that decision, well, that is the moment where you have Julian and other members of the Assassin Guild appear to attack Candra and Gambit to kill Gambit off, but to also get the elixir of life. Now, Gambit is able to actually take down all the different members of the Assassin Guild, including Julian, but at the same time, Julian was still able to stab Jean, the father of Gambit. Now, you have Gambit being able to blast everyone out of the apartment of Candra, but because he did save the life of Candra while she was being attacked by Julian in the Assassin Guild, she realized that she's now in his debt. She realized that she officially owes him now. So because you had Gambit being able to save her life, she said, fine, you know what? You can leave alive. and take your father as well. And so you have the two guys walk out. But before they do walk out, you have Gambit being able to steal a kiss from Candra. Now, when he does get that kiss from her, he also takes her part of the elixir of life. And so now he just needs the other two. And so just like that, he walks out. But by the time she realizes what he has done, it's too late. He's gone. And so she tells the collector, you know what? I want him dead. Tell the Thieves Guild, the Assassin Guild, tell everyone who are involved that Gambit must die. So as we get into the final chapter for this video, we do pick up with Gambit back in New Orleans. Now for Gambit, his main goal is to just get the final part of the elixir of life. He already has two. He got one from Candra that he stole, and his father gave him the other one. And that leads to the final one that Julian stole earlier from the collector. And so you have Gambit right now just going into a church where you have Julian believing that he'll meet up with Pierre and get the other sample or other part of the elixir of life, to only find out that no, he's meeting Gambit, who was then able to get all three pieces, getting the final piece from Julian. Now, for Julian, he begs Gambit to go ahead and give him all three pieces of the elixir. And the reason why, because he needs it badly. Because apparently, for Julian, he has been using the actual elixir of life, but there is a side effect to it. You see, the side effect changes you. It makes you go a tad bit insane as well. And so you have Julian go ahead, take off his mask to reveal what happened to some people who may take the actual elixir of life. And this brings in a huge problem because you didn't have Gambit take Julian back over to his father, Gene, being like, hey, Dad, did you know about the side effects of the elixir of life? And for Gene, he says, yes, I have always known about the side effects of the elixir of life. But the thing is, it's up to our members when it comes to them taking the elixir of life. Now, for Gambit, the reason why this is a problem because he was hoping to use the entire elixir of life on his wife to save her life. But unfortunately, now he's wondering if he does that, could her mind also be altered like Julian? Could his body be deformed just like Julian? And so now he is wondering what he should do when it comes to his wife and the elixir that could save her life. Now, before you have Gambit being able to make that kind of decision, well, we come to find out that the entire church is surrounded by different members of the Thieves Guild and also members of the Assassin Guild as well. Because again, Candra said Gambit must die. Tell both guilds that he has to go. And so because of that, they are now working with the collector surrounding the entire church. But when they get inside, Gambit is gone. He was able to cause a small diversion to kind of keep them distracted long enough to allow him to escape, to go back over to Belladonna. And really, when it comes to Belladonna, she's freaking out at the moment because she's having some kind of seizure. And for Maddie, she can't really help out Belladonna. She has no idea what exactly happened to her. We do because it's Rogue. And the thing is, Rogue is now thinking about all the times Belladonna was with Gambit. And so because of that, Rogue is now able to imagine herself being with Gambit like Belladonna was when she was with Gambit. And for Gambit, he does arrive just in time back to his house to hopefully get to Belladonna with the elixir of life. Except by the time he gets there, most of the members, not most, some of the members of the Assassin Guild are there to fight against him. And so you have Gambit trying to use his powers as a way to fight back against them. Now, once he was able to do that, he goes inside, except when he does get up the staircase or trying to go upstairs, he is confronted by the collector who now has Rogue and also Belladonna in his grasp. Now, you do have Gambit just go ahead and try to get close enough to the collector so that he is able to just grab onto his jacket. Now, once he's able to grab onto his jacket, you have Gambit say, hey, I'm going to use my powers on your jacket to basically send you flying right out the building. And just like that, there goes a collector. And so when it comes to Gambit, he was able to save Rogue and also Belladonna's life. But now the question is, should he use the elixir of life on his wife? Because again, there are side effects. And right now he's wondering if those side effects will actually come out if he gives it to her. And so for Gambit, he does decide to just go ahead and give Belladonna the actual elixir. Now, he has to make sure that he gives her the right amount so that she will not be affected by the side effects of the elixir. But then Julian walks into the room. Now, when he does, you have Julian go ahead and destroy the container that was holding the elixir. And the problem is now Belladonna may not get the elixir at all. And neither will Julian. Now, here's the thing. By this point in the story, Julian has now become completely selfish over wanting the elixir. And the reason why, because the side effects are kicking in right now. Originally, he was trying to get the elixir for himself and for his sister. By this point, it's more about him, just him. But now he has doomed his sister. But then, when he tries to battle against Gambit, he is killed off by his own father, Marquise. Now, for Marquise, this is actually a big moment. And the reason why, because it's Marquise saying, listen, the Assassin Guild will no longer go after Gambit. And the reason why, because this man was trying his best to save the life of my daughter. Now, it does seem like he has failed, but he still tried his best. And that right there is so important. Now, on top of that, the Thieves Guild is no longer going after Gambit as well. And the reason why? Because for Gambit, it's the whole idea of he's their brother. He's part of their family. And they're also going to back off as well. And so both people are kind of like, hey, we are not going to attack Gambit. And matter of fact, you have both guilds say, we are no longer going to follow the path that Candra has put out for us. It's now for a new beginning for the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild as well. Now for Candra, she can't believe in the idea that she has now lost both guilds, but she realized that she has to leave. And so just like that, she teleports out of there. Now, after all of that, you didn't have Jean tell Gambit that, listen, even though we're no longer coming after you, you have to realize that you are no longer welcome in New Orleans. And the reason why? Because this family right now, we all hate you because you're now forcing us to change. Now, maybe down the road, the newer members may forgive you, but us right now, the current members, we cannot. And so that these guild leave, hoping that Gambit will also leave as well soon. Now, this leaves in a sad moment, but times two, because you have Gambit realize that there's enough of the elixir that has spilled on the bed sheet. And so he is able to squeeze enough out to put in the mouth of Belladonna. Now, when she finally wakes up from her coma, she looks at Gambit and realizes that she has no idea who he is. And that is a huge moment right there. But on top of that, we also have to realize that the reason why she may not remember anything about Gambit because she touched Rogue earlier. Now, you have him say, you know what? It's okay. It's probably the best for us to go our separate ways again. And so you have Gambit walk away thinking that he'll get with Rogue. But Rogue knows what's wrong with Belladonna, and she's so afraid to tell Gambit to break his heart. And so she flies away, except with her doing that, it still breaks his heart. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.